PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me again is Steve Mera. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing good, Adam. How's things there?
Doing well. Like I was telling you about in pre here, it's Florida weather, man. Hot, cold, rains. It's foggy.
It's a bit like that everywhere at the moment. It's a bit changing all the time, you know.
Yeah, it's very bipolar state as far as weather goes.
Absolutely. Well, we've just had 3 days of summer. That is strange here for the UK. We're not used to it. Bring back the rain.
There's a lot of abnormal weather patterns taking place all over the globe. I mean, it's...
Well, yeah. I mean, they've said next week we're in for an Arctic blast, and yet it's been nice and warm today. So I don't know. I mean, it gets to be impossible to predict the weather, as we know. You know, it's always changing. We're always telling us these things are going to come, and then it changes last minute. So yeah. I don't think anybody can really predict it more than 24 hours, really, or 48, really, to be honest with you, to be very precise.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of tension in Europe right now, right? Because of the whole Ukraine thing.
Well, yeah, there is. Of course, we're seeing huge increases in bills here in the UK, in tax, in fuel, in everything. To be honest with you, and it's not a good situation.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Because here in Florida, because I was looking at some places down by the beach, and what used to be like $900 for rent, it's like $1,900 in rent. It's $1,000 raise. It's crazy.
Oh. Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah, well, the thing is there's not been any inflations in income and wages and things for quite a number of years there now. So
right,
we're struggling. There's a lot of people struggling here in the UK.
I think it's going to get worse because again, you can't raise rent and food and gas and then keep the pay the same. That makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to roll in this idealism of the electric cars now in the UK, and the problem is there's no electric points anywhere. You want people to change the vehicles, but there's nowhere to charge them. And unless you have someone come in and privately fit it, which is going to cost about £2,500, $3,000 in your region, which is a lot of money, especially when people haven't got it at the moment. You know, but they're starting to penalise people which are running vehicles on normal fuel. So it's getting a bit tricky.
I wouldn't put it past Elon Musk to create stations and just start giving away electric cars just so he's a dominant role. I wouldn't put it past this guy. I mean, he gave Ukraine the Starlink internet, and then he's funding the Ukraine. He's doing some pretty amazing stuff. Like by himself, he's funding the Ukraine to almost put Russia in a position where they kind of have to back down financially.
Yeah. I mean, word has it here that it's slowly starting to collapse in Russia. You know, Putin's following, and it's getting a bit tricky. It's getting a bit heated for him, I think. So things aren't gone as well as he had managed, should we say? I
really hope that this issue gets resolved. And on that subject, I've been reading. It's in all the Facebook groups and some of the other blogs I've been reading. People are like, wow. The aliens aren't going to let us nuke each other because they care about us. When reality is, we're a subject matter, right? We're an experiment. We're something to study. Their only motivation to not let us nuke each other so they don't lose their project.
Well, the bottom line is that they've always been interested in battles and wars, right back from the biblical days. And we want to look at just some of the old scriptures from Alexander the Great, these flying shields that appeared and apparently assisted him on besieging a city. They fired some beam of light down at this huge wall, but like the Jericho walls, 50 foot high, and they literally disintegrated. According to the scriptures, he was assisted by the gods. And it's not the first time you hear about these sort of things. I mean, if you actually look closely at many of the wars, the Battle of Sixburg, for instance, in France. Now, this one's really unusual because there was a besieging by this king and army of this castle, Sixburg Castle. And what happened is 2 objects came out of the sky and hovered over the castle And then one of them moved over directly over to the church, the Christian church, where there was at the top of this steeple was a crucifix, and it hovered right above the crucifix. And that was enough to scare them. It was enough to scare them away. And the besieging of Sixbury Castle never actually happened because of that event. And we see these things time and time again. I mean, if you look at the First World War, yes, we had objects being seen and reported. The Second World War, we had plenty of things reported there in the skies. They're like the watchers. They observe things. I even picked up on the fact that ABC and CBN picked up video recordings of objects sat in the sky over Baghdad as it was all going on in the Gulf War. And so it's not unusual to hear reported things. I picked up on a news item only a couple of weeks ago when someone from the Ukraine said that some beam of light came down from some object and literally disintegrated, I think, a tank or something like that. I don't know if it's some high-tech weapon or we're getting some assistance there. I really don't know. But there seems very much a close association with the phenomena of UFOs, which seemingly observe our little skirmishes, battles, and wars.
Yeah, if you look at how we study animals, like when the animal kingdom has full-on wars, like when you see two prides of lions going at it or hyenas, we don't get involved. We observe this.
Yes.
But if the lions figured out how to manipulate, the power of the sun, and they were going to, eradicate all life that we study, we would intervene. I think that's why the UFOs, you see, like people say things like, oh, the UFOs want us to not do this. They're going to nuclear sites and sending beams of light. I think that's just them checking to see if they could do it, right? In the event that they would have to. Hopefully.
I think so. And I think it's also a demonstration of power. I think it also delivers a very strong message that they have the capabilities not only to seemingly diffuse these warheads that we have, but also on occasion they've set them off. Only seconds before allegedly launching, they've disarmed, as if to say, yes, we are in full control. And what we see is when an examination, I read the report on this, the examination of the warhead showed no tampering whatsoever. In fact, nothing had been inside that warhead. And once they opened it up, they saw that things had been disarmed. Things had been taken apart or moved. And yet there was no clear sign of anybody going into that warhead. So how this is being done is remarkable.
Indeed. And you know what? The message again is don't mess with their study, because here's another big thing too. And the more, since I started this podcast speaking with you and other people, I've evolved. I've learned more. And I'm under the impression now that abduction has been going on. People say it's been going on since the 40s. It's been going on way longer than that. Like there's from the 1800s studies I've read. And so,
oh God, see, it goes back even further than that. I mean, I think the earliest record of the first time I can find any account. Myself and my colleague did some research on this, and he came up with 700,000 BC. And that was the oldest date. We couldn't go back any further, where they were worshipping something which was not of humanoid descent. And of course, this deity or whatever this thing was that they were worshipping was said to be like serpent-like creature. And of course, if you go into sort of biblical times, you hear stories that people have gone off with these entities not to be seen again. And of course, we got the story of Enoch and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that this phenomena, we now call it contact experiences and abductions. You're right. It could have been going on for a long time, and it's just been put down as or written as something slightly different. But if you look at the elements of it, it's no different really than the modern day phenomena.
Agreed. If they're going to do a project like hibernization, that's not something that happens in a lifetime. And the more I research this, even with an advanced life form, an advanced intelligence, you're talking generations, millennia to perfect that. So they could breathe our air and have our digestive tracts and they could have our organs. If like a mankind, if we go to another planet and we find that there's intelligent life there, but we can't breathe in the atmosphere, you better believe we'd be abducting them, right? How do we make our hybrid so we could coexist on this planet? We do it all the time. We abduct animals all the time for the same kind of projects. It's not people that say this is fantastic. They don't have it wrong. Look what we do in science, and then times it by 20 by an advanced life form, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We're doing exactly the same thing, and we don't even give anything to think about what they might be considering, what is these animals might be considering, what the hell is going on. To them, it's all very profound, the experience of it. But yes, we do it. We tag them. We put implants in some of these things, to monitor what they're like and what the biological system's doing. We're always doing things like this to learn about not just aquatic life, but land animals as well.
Right.
And we do get a lot of information from it. And we have to also consider is that, can we better humanity? I mean, I know we were talking about, okay, maybe things are going on there and we're not aware. But seemingly the extraterrestrials have been doing so. I mean, what we've got to do now, we've got the technology to closely look at human DNA and say, something isn't quite right here. Because when we start to look at it, we start to see evidence of intelligent design. There's been alteration, there's been splicing, there's chromosome 2, for an example. That's not a natural thing.
Right.
We would expect to see that maybe in the lab, but it is not a natural thing. And there's an order and a procession of numbers, according to the DNA experts, that simply cannot exist normally. It has to be manufactured. So maybe that we have been finely tuned and continue to be finely tuned, the human race, because we are developing. Not just developing in consciousness, but developing certain abilities. There are lots of children all over the world now with strange, unusual abilities. Yeah, they're very profound, and a lot of researchers can't really fathom how they manage to do these things. But it's incredible that how we are advancing, and that's just within my lifetime.
Right.
You take 100,000 years, you think, well, where are we going to be, and what are we going to be like?
I mean, if you look at if you look at our technology and how it's evolving in a small period of time, and you give us another 1,000 years, yeah, we're going to be near immortal with the inventions we're coming out with. And to your point, the human brain is pretty identical across the board, right? We all have the same hardware, but some of us have different software or even downloads, which give them, strange abilities. Examples are being like people get these head injuries and they can play piano out of nowhere, speak languages. It's our brain is basically a complex computer with the ability to do greater things. We just don't utilize it at its full capacity. So I agree.
We are slowly learning. We are slowly looking at our DNA and our brain capabilities and stuff, and discovering new areas of research. And we just can't work it out. We just can't fathom how and why, and the complexities of the brain, what the hell it's doing, because it acts like a separate entity on many occasions and overrules what is a necessity for the human body. I first came across this when we started to have crisis apparitions reported. Now, this is people which are under tremendous stress and trauma from losing a close one in the family. And as part of that trauma, the brain creates an illusion or an hallucinatory event of those individuals, and may even communicate with those individuals and say, look, don't worry about me, I'm fine, everything's okay, and carry on your life. And people have reported that time and time again. What is interesting is they immediately change. The whole psychology of that incident causes them to become more relaxed, less stressed, no vexation, less worry, and it does serve a purpose. Now, there is some of those incidents we have to say, yes, they probably have paranormal attributes. But we also have to say the brain has the capabilities of saying, do you know what? I don't like this condition. I don't like the way the body's feeling at the moment. It's stressful. I'm gonna try and achieve something which will cause less stress. And under those circumstances can create hallucinatory events, which can in turn actually help. So it acts as a separate entity in some cases.
Right. How much of the brain, think about what the brain could do, right? It's also a receptor. If you look at the construct of the brain, it seems like it could pick up radio waves. And there's these old programs where I saw, again, I reference Future Weapons a lot. They had like this percussion thing, something that would put sound waves out. And it could render someone unconscious. It could even do, fatal damage at a certain, when they're using certain hertz. So the point I make is perhaps maybe some of the paranormal things going on is something on the other side could use, like, the brain as a receptor to communicate. Maybe it's not a physical thing. Maybe they're putting receptions into your brain, something you're picking up like a radio wave, and that's how they communicate.
Absolutely. I mean, you could be in an area where that transmission is happening. It might not happen to everybody, but it might happen to some.
Right.
And this is what we have with the paranormal. We have so many people saying, you know what, I've never experienced anything in my life. And then you've got other people who said, I've had experiences all my life. How does that work? I mean, it's got to be something to do with the individuals and how they're obtaining that information. Some are better than others. But we do know that there are some exceptional people. The tests have been carried out where in scientific labs, trying to fathom how much we really do know. Do we really, is there more than just our five senses? Absolutely. And we know now that the body even prepares itself for future things you're unaware of. The smallest of tests were carried out on putting people in these rooms watching a television showing several different types of images. And it all nice images, little kittens and a nice lamb and all this sort of thing. And all of a sudden, one of those images is quite horrific, and they startled them. But over a period of time, they started to realize when conducting these tests that when they were measuring the body was starting to react prior to the bad image, as if it was preparing itself for it, when they shouldn't have really known it even existed. So we are in touch with something within even in the future, that the brain can somehow manage to prepare yourself for it, even if you're not aware of it or not.
Yeah, there's organizations out there, scientists that are trying to map the brain. They're with the idea of uploading, downloading your consciousness, where I believe our consciousness is the same as our soul. I think it's the same thing, just pure energy, raw energy. And if the brain has the capacity to have all these receptors, sure, I could see there being a warning system, because perception's a big thing. It takes us whatever we're looking at in life, it's not in real time. There is some latency there. What you look at versus what your brain processes. How much of what you're seeing is your brain processing? I read a study that if you look at something enough, like let's say you walk around your house, your brain has a strong memory to the house. So some of what you're looking at might just be reconstruction because your brain recognizes its environment. Now, if you have a paranormal event take place, your brain now has to factor that in because your computer is now got to rebuild what you just saw to help you understand what it is. And your flight or fight starts kicking in. You have an adrenaline rush, right? You're having a chemical response. And that could factor in on what it is you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people do have that. I mean, we ignore those natural responses. And I've always said to people, those are the most prominent. Your skin, it consists of it's all over your body, and it reacts to conditions. Paranormal investigators have reported it. It's that strange feeling when the hair stands up on end and you get goosebumps. You might not see something, you might not hear something, but your body's telling you there's something which it doesn't like in that environment. Yeah. It's a warning mechanism, that intuition that we relied on many years ago, and it's seemingly being forgotten. And we're becoming too reliant on the known senses that we have. We have it and we use it just in everyday practice. I mean, when people are buying houses, what is it when they turn around and say, do you know what, just doesn't feel right? Or this feels wonderful, it has a good vibe. I mean, really, there's a lot more to it than just that, because we are relying on it, even though we're not using it sometimes, we're not aware of using it, but I think everybody has it to some degree. And unfortunately, I think it's that old survival sense. Maybe it was used years ago when predators were watching us from the bushes and giving us that, I've got that funny feeling that I'm being watched. Maybe it was a survival instinct, but you know what? Most people just go to the shops now and survive easily, don't they? But, but it's seemingly one of the same thing.
I mean, I agree with you totally. I think our predator detection is, so a lot of the times when you see something in your peripheral vision, that's your strongest vision in most cases, because it's your body and brain being aware of an attack from who knows where. So there's definitely an alert system there. There's no question that. There's people that all the time say that, like, during just prior to a car crash or a plane incident, they could detect it. They just knew. So their software was updated, right? So they're utilizing that part of their computer, their brain, to detect these things.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I don't know what are we developing this. I think it's the other way around, Adam. I think it's that we utilized it more, such as our ancient ancestors, which were connected to the land and could pick up energies and maybe had numerous different abilities like this. But as time's gone on, we've developed and become more reliable on the other senses. So this one becomes somewhat subdued. If you don't use it, you lose it scenario. And I think some people, have become to use it a lot more and become more sensitive. And some people completely ignore it and wouldn't have a clue. It does vary in individuals, but it proves that we do have it. It does exist, and it's not a listed known sense. We call it ESP or the sixth sense or whatever. We haven't really got a proper name for it because it consists of so many things.
I see this example in detectives. I talk to a lot of detectives, and a lot of them, like when I ask about their cases, it's like, I just had this feeling or this instinct. And, that's a form of ESP. That's a bit of a psychic thing they got going on. It's not admitted, right? But
absolutely. That gut instinct, it really is important.
Yeah. And then to your point, here's what I think is happening. That instinct or that ability with the advent of smart devices, and people are so in their phone or tablets or their games, I think we're dulling that sensory down.
Yeah, we're disconnecting.
Yeah,
absolutely. We need to get back to the land and get back to the realism of life and the reality we live in it.
Agreed.
Because there's just too many distractions that puts us into a fantasy world, to be honest with you, and disconnects us from lots of things in our environment.
I think what do you think it is? I think, Elon Musk is going to introduce Neuralink sometime in the future. And this is something it's a device that gets implanted into the brain. It's essentially going to be there to help people that had brain injury, but eventually it'll be utilized for, we could communicate without words. We could send images to one another, messages, no use for your mouth, no use for your hands, because you could just communicate with a knowing. I think that's going to bridge the gap between the paranormal and regular, normal experiences due to the fact that I think that chip might connect the consciousness and subconsciousness together, allowing your perception to be greater.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I read articles on this 15, 20 years ago when they were predicting by 2050 we may have this. That's how fast technology is moving. Will people want it? There'll always be some which don't want to merge with artificial intelligence. I think it is inevitable for our species that we are going in that direction. So for some, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
But for others, there's many, many advantages. It's got its good points. It's got its bad points.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when we're talking about the development of a civilization, I believe that any form of intelligent life out there in the universe would have utilized some form of artificial intelligence to better themselves in one way or the other, to advance that society.
I would think that's a must because, my theory in the little gray aliens, the smaller ones, like I've told you before, I think they're an advanced biological robot that come down here and do the work. And the actual beings themselves stay. I was told by one guy in an off-air podcast or off-air interview that he believes that the actual biological grays stay just outside the moon, right? That they're stationed outside the moon, which explains a lot of why you see these UFOs going from 80,000 feet to 0 feet, transferring something to the underwater. And 9 out of 10 times when I talk to people that have seen the larger, but they're considered to be the biological gray, it seems like a hologram. And then you consider what our technology is with holograms for us. Imagine an advanced life form. It's almost like being here, VR, to do the study.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
absolutely. To go back to, if you look at Ingo Swann, who was part of the Stanford Research Institute as a remote viewer, when he wrote in his autobiography, it was absolutely fascinating when he was remote viewing the moon, the dark side, or should we say the far side of the moon, actually. And he claimed, and it's wrote clearly in his book, that he made notes of some type of beings. They weren't human, but they were beings. And what surprised him mostly is that they didn't wear any clothing.
Right. Yeah.
and it's very strange. I mean, this is the late 70s, it's very profound then. But he was very surprised that they were aware of him watching remote viewingly. They seemed to be aware and looking towards him. And of course, he wasn't there in a physical sense, but yet they were aware of him being consciously around them.
Well, I imagine they have an elevated sense, a much more elevated state of consciousness, right? Especially if you're talking about a very advanced race that's already got a Neuralink, their own version of it, and it has, I don't know, 100,000 years of technology behind it. I think, again, what I said earlier, when you're utilizing this, it's going to increase your sensory and perception, and perhaps you would see things that, and that's why when I said earlier about us, we're going to bridge the gap between the normal and paranormal. When you have an increased sensory and your perceptions really increased, I think you're going to be able to take notice of things that you otherwise wouldn't. I mean, largely in part, I think the paranormal has something to do with perception.
I totally agree. I mean, we look at the limitations of the human eye, just for an example. We see next to nothing. I mean, to be honest, we're the dullest of all animals on the planet, sensory-wise, and you wouldn't expect that from us, but we are. But have we been limited for a reason? I do not know. But one thing is for sure, is no matter what other animal, insect, bird, or whatever you find out there, they have a better vision, a better scope of vision than even we do. And it's remarkable how they can do that. We have so many limitations in our hearing, in our seeing. All our sensories are very, very limited. And there could be a lot existing within those other realms that we just are completely unaware of.
Yeah, like I watch a lot of big cat stuff. I love big cats, and when you watch like leopards when they're hunting, their ability to see, hear, feel, like they even sense vibration. They've been recently noticed that they could, when their paws on the ground, if something moves to their right, they're aware of it. And so, and then you got the prey animal. Its ears and its eyes are built just to be on detection all the time, right? It's that predatory, primal predator versus prey thing where their sensors are really increased. Where humans, modern day humans, we live in a bubble, and our bubble is our own universe, right? So
we really are. We're actually
Steve, I got to tell you this, man. I do some of the off-air interviews I do. I get these people, and they reach out to me just for the point of, like, I guess debunking what it is I'm trying to research. And one individual turned to me and said, "You realize this is it's Satan doing this?" And I was like, "What?" So he's like, "Yeah, it's the devil." So yesterday I had a gentleman on the show. He spent 20 years in the occult. And when you hear the occult, the first thing you think is like, oh, Satanists, and they're going to do horrible things. But it's my responsibility as a researcher if I'm going to do this, I got to evaluate every angle. I can't limit myself. I can't wear protective sunglasses to avoid the things I think may not be feasible. I have to open my eyes up to everything. And listening to him, the similarities in the occult, the similarities in Christianity, the similarities in Judaism, all these different religions, they all have a pretty similar baseline.
Yes, they do.
And and the paranormal fits in right there.
It really does. Yeah, I mean, not enough people research it, but you know what? I mean, what we got to consider now is when we start to read a lot of this biblical stuff and stuff, how much it's been fashioned for society, and it has, and there are still changes. I'm sure there's more changes to come, but it has been fashioned for society. But when you overlap, say, for instance, numerous other different type of biblical books, the Torah and others, you'll find the similarities and the same things. They may have different names,
right?
And different belief in some of these things, but they're fundamentally at the core, they're the same thing.
I agree. And here's the thing. I think religion across the board, I said this on a lot of podcasts. I want people to understand I'm not attacking religion. I think religion has a fantastic, peaceful message until you get a charismatic, self-serving narcissist who's at the helm of it. And he's only, he's preaching these words to fit his agenda. And that's where you have problems, right? This is exampled again in Roman times, right? Where they went into ancient Greece and they saw these inventions and they put the lid on that. Like, nope, that's not of God. Stop it now. And I say this a lot too. We're 2,000 years behind on technology because of that suppression. It scares me.
It is. I mean, look at the great effort to spread Christianity across the world. I mean, it led to many wars, and forcing out other religions to do so. And we did it a lot. I mean, and we forced it down the throats of these people that never heard anything about Christianity before.
Right.
But there was one that precedes it, which was more intense, and that is the worship of deities that came from the sky gods, heavenly beings, visitors, whatever you want to call them. Every single ancient civilization talks of the same story. That is more widespread than Christianity was ever. And that was done forcefully. So how or what happened back then to cause all these different civilizations from all over the globe to consider the same thing?
You're right.
Now that's what I find fascinating, because we had to really push it down the throats of all these other civilizations, Christianity. We had to forcefully do it. We had to go to war to do it. I mean, it was ridiculous. But at the end of the day, there's something that happens prior to all the biblical Christianity, and that is the worship of star people, sky gods, call them what you will. Every ancient civilization has them, from India to Easter Island. It's a small island in the middle of nowhere. It was hard to find in the 1930s. I mean, and yet the same belief system by the civilizations across all the planet had the same thing. And that's what makes it very fascinating.
And they're all described very similar. Fiery light, a bright light coming down. The majority speak of metallic items. And before the advent of metal, these are described as angels because they're in their armor and they're coming down in light. And this is even, again, like you said, even in the ancients, even in the Egyptians, even in the Sumerians, they discuss things coming down. Like, I was talking to a few people about this. I still look at that Sumerian tablet where it depicts our solar system, Neptune and Pluto included, long before the invention of the telescope. This blows my mind that we ignore this.
They should not have known how many planets are in our solar system. I mean, even if a child goes out there, you take a young child out there and point up to the heavens, they don't have a clue what star or planet is. It could be anything to them.
Yeah.
And yet, civilizations all over the planet seemingly knew a lot more than what we can visually see in the heavens. And that data must have come from somewhere.
Yeah. And people say, I heard one person explain it as well. They were just using their imagination. That's erroneous. Something educated them to what that system is for them to depict it on a stone long before any invention of something to look out there. It's either
we have ancient civilizations that can pinpoint a star and call it a binary star system. How did it know? We don't know that it was a binary star system till like the 1930s or 1940s, when astronomers got good enough technology to look at the star and realize, hang on a second, it is a binary star system. And yet that information is thousands and thousands of years old. It can't be seen by the naked eye. And yet there's countless pieces of information that's been put forward in ancient texts, writings, scriptures, inscribes, of all the same type of stories, and yet they shouldn't have known it. They shouldn't have known.
Agreed. It's either suppressed or ignored. Blows my mind. And then top this off, what you said earlier about us being engineered, there is still this gap of mankind in history.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe we're still looking for the missing link. And the reason why there's a missing link is because there is a missing link. They're never going to find what's going to go in between ape and man, because it doesn't exist.
Right.
I mean, I think this was a counter argument of Darwin. I mean, when Darwin came forward to put his evolutionary theory book, it was a theory. That's why it's called the evolutionary theory. And even if you actually read his biography, he wasn't even convinced himself. He stays nearer to the back of his biography. This is only a theory, however, and some things don't add up. I mean, I can understand micro, evolution in birds, for example. If you take the finch that lives on a particular island and the normal finch from, say, the US, they're going to be different.
Right.
Because the finch on the island has to eat a different type of food, so it grows its beak longer. Well, not a big deal, that. I can understand that, But when we start talking about from ape to man, we would have de-evolutionary process, because the apes are better than us. Why did we go backwards? I mean, they can see in the dark, they can chew and swallow at the same time.
And extremely strong.
Extremely strong. The hair stops growing at a certain length. The nails stop growing at a certain length. And you know what? They've only got around about 10. If you look at a chimpanzee, got about maybe 10 to 30, problems with it in regards to genetics.
Right.
If you look at the human being, we have thousands of genetic errors. Why have we de-evolved? I mean, we can't even walk properly. This is why humans are always falling over, because we walk on the two balls of our feet.
That's true.
Now, these apes are flat-footed. You know, they don't fall over, and yet we've got worse and worse and worse. So why would we suddenly take a leap forward and go backwards in evolution? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
It's true. You know, another thing too, if you consider this, people say, well, it sounds crazy and far-fetched. Well, how about this? How many fruits, vegetables have been altered significantly over the course of time with man? You ever see what images of tomatoes, bananas, and grapes, and they didn't look anything like today. We manipulated the DNA or the structure of these things to better suit us. We do this with animals. How many? Think about where dogs came from.
Yeah, they're genetically modified. And you know what? We don't think much about it. We just pick them up and say, oh, look, you know, they look really nice, large and ripe and all that sort of thing. Well, it's the genetically modification that makes that.
Right.
You know, and reproduce. It's been tampered with. It's not natural. It's not nature producing it.
Prior to mankind's intervention, there were no chihuahuas, right? They didn't exist in the wild. They wouldn't have survived in the wild, right? Everything came from a wolf or a wild dog or something of that nature to what we have in our homes today. So when you hear people say, well, there's no way aliens are trying to manipulate our DNA, well, of course they are. It's an experiment, and it doesn't happen in your lifetime. It takes a very long time to perfect this. And
I heard since the mid 1980s that we have 40 new species of cattle.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a natural process. What they've done is they've genetically created the cattle from taking and implanting them from other cattle. It's a bit sad. You know, you got one cattle that live a long time, so we use a part of that. We got one which is very large, so in other words, that's great for if it's going to be for livestock or whatever. We got another one, it's reluctant, you know, it doesn't get many diseases. And what they do is make a cocktail, implant them, and breed them. We have 40 new different variations of cattle on this planet simply because of genetics.
Yep. And so now you take what we do and scale it up with great advancements. It's more practical. It should be. You'd think more people on this planet would say, well, is abduction real or not? I don't know, but does it make sense? Sure it does. If we're an experiment, we're being observed, it absolutely makes sense. Because, again, if humanity found a planet where there's some air we can't breathe, but there's intelligent life, you better believe we're taking them, because we want to know how we could get into that planet. How do we utilize that world? Because that's what, at the end of the day, that's what it is. If you think about it, like all the wars and all the sightings during wars, that's their entertainment. And that's also their education. They're learning us. As well as the entire, imagine what, if you went back in time to the first alien to make the first observation of man, say, wow, they're interesting. And then show them what we become with reality TV. To be like, I don't know. Do we give these guys a leap of help? Because they're a little out of control. But yeah.
It's feasible. I mean, you know, that there is that argument, the extra tempestual argument, which is these things are us from the future. You know,
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that.
It's one of those, you know, one of the things that seems to be circulating the block at the moment, this theory. I don't know if I sit pretty with it, to be honest with you. I mean, yes, I could understand that if we live in an environment in the future where there's less light, we probably would grow larger eyes, you know, and maybe we won't shield them against certain radiations. Would we become, you know, small beings, thin beings? Well, we would be less reliant on our muscles if we could have the power of PK and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't know if I sit pretty with it, to be honest with you. There are some people who want to argue the point that it could be us from the future. I think they're more intrusive than that. You know, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, I think it's a great theory. I don't subscribe to it. I'll tell you why. I think we would have communicated with the government at least. Like, look, we're here. Here's what happened, and we need to take a new course of action, right? We would definitely do that. Whereas opposed to we're being studied, like National Geographics, we can't get involved. We can't, like, if there's two animals killing each other, we can't do anything about this, right? But if we hit one with our car, now we're obligated. So I think we're definitely being studied. And there's no way it's us because we're pretty abrasive, right? We just say, look, this is what happened. We got to fix this shit. You know what I mean?
We must have known that we've been being studied for a long time now.
Right.
It's a long, very, very long, very long. I mean, as far as I'm aware, it could have been going on forever. We could be the petri dish, and the planet could be a whole zoo, as far as I'm aware. But the problem is that when you have reports and you look at those reports and you work out, there's over 1,200 different entities that have been seen: small, large, hairy, blue-colored, green ones, glowing ones, robot ones.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I look at that and I think that's problematic for me, because it sounds very much like a Star Trek episode, that they're all bipedal and they're all, they can all communicate and they're all coming from different places. I mean, fair enough. I can't say it doesn't happen, but what I am saying is that, if they were just extraterrestrial coming back from the future, then what are all those other entities?
Right.
It's just crazy.
Here's my theory to that, by the way, is that the initial race that came here to observe us many thousands of years ago, they set up the smaller gray biological robots to come down here and do the field work. And eventually other races did stumble upon them. They saw this other race and they're like, listen, you don't have to go down there. Their air may not be good for you, or we don't get involved because it's a study. But we have these little gray things. They're proven in the field, and we'll rent them out to you. You want to go do experiments? You want to see how these people operate? And here's the rules and guidelines of our rentals, right? So they're renting the little gray things out.
That actually would fall in line with reports where people have said, well, you know what, I saw these small grey beings with a large reptilian,
right,
or with human-looking beings, or Pleiadian. I mean, look at Travis Walton incident. You got these Nordic-type beings, Pleiadian types, with the greys during his incident. So, I mean, because back then he was saying, like, well, the greys are one source, you want to stay away from them because they're the ones that do all the abductions. Well, these are the good guys, the human-looking ones. And yet you get encounters where, they've got reports together, of seeing these things, and that causes the confusion.
Yeah. So like I said, I think that these are, they got it, like, the pitch from the original, observers, like, listen, these little gray guys got a proven track record. If you want to do experiments or you want to go there and view these people up close, here's our gray model. It's the new 2022. It can get down there and see them up close. Or if you don't want to be that invasive, here's our new orb. It's like a drone technology. You could go view whatever's going on down on Earth without being directly involved, because that breaks the rules of their National Geographics, right?
I mean, I think a lot of these things that people are seeing in the skies are these type of drones. I mean, though that there are people who report seeing crafts, I get that. But a lot of these things are, there was a recent video turned up on the internet recently, which we analysed to be authentic. And it came from Israel. And it was a military base in Israel about 5-6 years back. And it had infrared cameras over the military base. And in the sky were several balls of light that were shimmering, slightly different colours, mostly amber. And they were dropping a string of smaller objects. Now, we've seen these things before, and they seem to disappear after a while. And they shot 2 of these things with a missile. And the missile collided with both, there was about 7 in the sky, and it collided with 2 of them. And the 2 completely shattered, as if burst like a bubble. And then they all came back and reformed again within seconds, as if it made no difference whatsoever. That they're not physical in nature, but how they came back to being them again after being thrown out and dispersed into the atmosphere. And then you can see all those particles come back together and reform, and then they just carry on. And I thought to myself, you know what? I mean, I think some of these are intelligent plasma type of thing, or some type of probes or something.
Well, yeah, to support that right now. I'm not even kidding. This is a real thing. I watch a lot of these science things too. Military ones. They fascinate me. We've already been discussing the idea of using nanotechnology to make a great body of, like, let's say a fighter jet. And when a missile comes, they could disconnect and then reconnect after the missile has passed. This is something we're discussing. This isn't science fiction. This is something on the table. Nanotechnology making a troop on the ground. So,
Well, they made, actually, there was a Lamborghini that was made a couple of years ago. You can find it on the internet. And the whole skin of this was nanotechnology. And the design was that if it was got scratched or marked or dinted, it would self-repair.
right.
And they only ever made one of these because obviously the expense, but it was remarkable. And that's what we do know, let alone what we don't know.
Right. Imagine, because if we're talking about this, it's in science magazines, it's on documentaries, a Lamborghini. You got to know that the government's got a project that no one's ever going to hear about.
Absolutely. They must have, sort of technology, self-repairing technology. Of course, they must have. They must have a lot of toys and things that they have now, and maybe implementing them into some of this high technology and stuff. The problem is now is that we've got to an era where it's becoming very difficult to identify what's in the sky, because we have to start questioning now, is that how much is it our own?
Well, yeah,
because
especially now.
Flying it over towns and cities, because only people are only going to shout UFO, and it draws the attention away from them anyway. So they're not bothered.
I agree. I mean, let's consider this. We've known about Area 51 for quite a while, some decades. It wasn't until Barack Obama to say it I think he's the first president to say it publicly.
Yes.
Right? To admit to its existence publicly. That's in the 2000s. Like that's recent times. And we've known about this, right? Think of how long it took for the government to put together a quote unquote disclosure. Say, well, there's things here we don't know what they are. And that's just them admitting what they kind of know, let alone what they've been studying for who knows how long. So for people like, well, it could be nonsense. Well, I'll tell you what, the stealth program was hush hush for a very long time. It wasn't until the early 90s when we revealed it.
Well, I looked at reports back when we were flying. The Americans were flying the Starfighter, and it was a very, very efficient aircraft, and it was used lots in combat from military bases like that. And they were coming up against things which they couldn't identify. It outflew them, and we're talking sort of mid-70s here. And it turned out that was the test flights of the Nighthawk of the stealth fighter.
Yep.
It was manufactured in 73 and flown. There's actually a Lockheed book that's got photographs in it from 1974 of the stealth fighter. Now, I didn't see it until probably around about the Gulf War, around about 1991 or something. And we all thought, what the hell is that? Has come out to play from the Americans, and then we realised, well, hang on a second, it's been flying around for almost 20 years. And no wonder some of these pilots, were pitted against them purposely, would reporting an unidentified object of unusual shape and incredible speed. They were being pitted against it. And of course, those pilots weren't allowed to talk about it. It was just one of those incursions they do purposely to see how our fighter pilots how they're going to engage a stealth fighter in the 1970s.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too. Like today's most superior fighter jet is the F/A-22 Raptor. Now that was in design in the late 80s, being practiced in the 90s, and wasn't even revealed till like the end of I think the early 2K. And so if that is now been revealed there, tested in the 90s and concept in the 80s, imagine what's in concept now.
This is why we have this big problem on technological advancement, because you can go by every 10 years, by every decade, and say, okay, yeah, we had propeller planes, and then we had the jet engine was designed, and then we had high-speed fighter jets, and then came across the stealth, and then it went dead, and then it went quiet, because the next 10 years we still have stealth, and the next 10 years we still have stealth, and so on and so forth. Since the 1970s to 2021, how many you count those years up? You're talking 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And yet we're still on stealth technology. Hang on a second. We surely must have, because it did the leaps and bounds every 10 years was something dramatic. But it went black. The whole program when it reached the stealth. And we're still looking at that technology now.
Yeah. And we're not going to unveil our best toy, not till we need to. That's just how we are, Here's another thing too. It's debunkers. Although I guess, look, I appreciate their existence. It's important to have pushback so you could study harder. I think it's irresponsible to sit in your house and be like, nope, that's not real. Based on logic, that's not good enough. You got to go out there and research this. Like, listen, I don't fully subscribe to Bigfoot personally. That doesn't mean I don't believe it's real. It just means I don't subscribe to the idea of it. But I have a responsibility. If I'm going to go do a documentary, I have to go look. I can't say it in just one shot. Well, no, not real because of this, that, and this is what logic says. I have to go in the field, spend at least 2 to 3 years researching this before I can make an educated decision on that. And even when I make that decision, it's for my own. It's my own opinion. It's not going to be science fact, right?
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've talked to many witnesses who have experienced things that shouldn't exist, especially here in the UK. We don't know how. We aren't even big enough to have a Bigfoot in this country. Where would he hide? What would he eat?
Right.
And I mean, yeah, people, believe it or not, even in the UK, have reported seeing these things. And I've interviewed them. And I've seen these women, break down in tears. And I can see them reliving that moment. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, I believe they experienced it. I don't know what it was. And it similarly can't be what we thought it might be, because it just seemingly couldn't exist unless we're dealing with a phenomenon that can seemingly, materialize into something what they might conceive it to be. But hand on heart, I'd have to say, I believe they've experienced some of these things.
Right.
But I'm trying to conclude on something. Blimey, that is so difficult, especially here in the UK. I could understand maybe if we're living out in the regions of Canada or Oreo,
Ohio, something really vast
areas, then maybe. But there's no room for Bigfoots in the UK. You only got to go 53 miles in either direction. You hit the sea. There is no place for them in this country, and yet they are reported. As they are with dogmen are as well. It
makes me wonder, because we'd spoken about vibrations in the past and frequencies and if you consider Stonehenge, right? There's some people speculating that it's not in its full construct, right? We're seeing the aftermath of it. It's probably older than what we think. And perhaps maybe it takes certain elements or alignments for it to have like a charge and actually be a functioning, we'll say, machine. And maybe some of these things these people are seeing is just, again, it's perception. Like the receptors in their head is getting hit with a certain phenomena that's having them perceive these things. So perhaps that their software in their brain got an upload and they were able to see a different parallel.
Yes.
It has my curiosity.
Yeah, when realities merge and they're in that environment to experience it, that's what they're going to report. They're going to report some strange things. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's fundamentally living and breathing within our reality, but they've certainly witnessed something. And it's interesting you mentioned about Stonehenge, because Stonehenge was slightly moved many years back. I've got the photographs on how it kind of happened. But it was, they've had to take the stones off and put them back on to repair them and stuff like that. And there's a lot of messing about. But it is lined up for it's quite funny when you go there and you see all these children with the families and go, oh, look, Peter, look at the lovely stones and stuff. And he sat on the sacrificial stone. The blood sacrifice stone right in the centre there. This was at a time when blood sacrifice was very popular around the planet in numerous civilizations. But it was said to be, according to the documentation, scripts and things like that, it was the gods that decided that. It's the gods that demand it. I mean, you don't have to go far. You can actually just go to the Christian Bible.
Right.
And how God acted against Moses when he was annoyed with Moses' brother.
Yep.
Because Moses' brother was a bit naughty and decided to build this golden calf and worship it. And he was absolutely furious, God, and he was going to smite him. And it's not the first time. I mean, if you read through the Bible, you'll find that God demanded that one person might have to kill his brother as a sacrifice to God. And I don't make any sense. I thought, hang on, is this the Christian God that we know? He had bad days. He had mood swings, and it's not good.
Yeah. You got to forgive and forget. And meanwhile, I was like, wait, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm going to smite that guy. This isn't going to work for me. Yeah.
It's not all love and light. I mean, people like to think it's all, they take the best elements from a religion and say, oh, yes, this is what it represents. But there are some dark areas within in the Bibles that we know. If you want to go to King James or the New Testament, there are some dark areas in there.
Yeah, a lot of the flaws in religion are human error. All right? It's what again, if you take the fundamental message of peace and forgiveness and blah blah, yeah, and don't kill a neighbor, don't cheat on your wife, like these are great fundamentals to follow until some guy gets the helm of the ship. He's like, listen, I talked to God yesterday, I'm the chosen one, and you should all drink the punch.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah, and look, isn't it still happening today? It's just in the hierarchies, but it's exactly the same thing.
It's the truth.
Do as I say, not do as I do.
This leads me to one of the points you emailed to me, the poltergeist disturbances. That's got my complete fascination. What is your take on that?
Well, I mean, first off, it is a rare phenomenon, truly rare. A real poltergeist infestation. I mean, if you go onto YouTube, you'll see everybody's got one these days. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But I've spent 40 years in this subject and investigated 6 accounts. And that's not a lot compared to hauntings, would we say. There's a combination of errors that take place between interactive, or you might refer to them as intelligent haunting, and poltergeist phenomena. But when we were truly looking at a poltergeist infestation, we're looking at those type of disturbances which follow a pattern. Now, what's interesting about poltergeist phenomena is like there's a rule book, and it always seems to start the same. It starts with your audible disturbances, the scratchings, the bangings, the annoying things that's going to annoy you, keep you up at night, those sort of things. And then it develops into the next stage of object manipulation, which is a wonderful part, because that's when you get all your stacking of objects, your moving of objects, apportations, when they appear and disappear as asportations, objects that appear that don't belong, and all those wonderful things. And then it progresses again into the physical phenomena, where you start to see dark shadows and things, because they don't really seem to take much of a forming unless you really think it's you being haunted by Uncle Albert. It could actually take on the appearance of Uncle Albert. There was a very interesting case some years ago in Yorkshire in the UK in the late 80s, when a young girl who was 16 or something disappeared, and she hadn't been found for almost a year, and it was presumed that the worst had happened. She'd befallen some problem or something, and the family were absolutely distraught, and they started to see her apparition and disturbances taking place in the house, especially around her room. To them, that sealed it for them, that their daughter was no longer in the land of the living. And they'd become, quite fixed that obviously this was the case. Until she turned up one day, knocking on the door, who'd ran off with some boyfriend, and had finally returned home in tears. And they couldn't understand how they'd seen the apparition of her, and how these disturbances and bangs and things being moved around in the bedroom. That just lent hand to the belief and the trauma the family were going through may have induced it. Right. May have induced, and we do know that we can make buildings haunted by the power of belief. There's tests being carried out. We can manufacture apparitions and haunting phenomena. There was a very well-known scientific study that was done in Canada, in Ontario, known as the Philip experiment. There's going to be another experiment taking place in the near future about the manufacture of this phenomenon. It can be conjured by strong belief, in a sense of speaking, and I think that's what happens. But the true poltergeist phenomena is very disturbing. Now, according to the biggest societies in the world, these parapsychological departments, the scientific studies that they document, SPR, the psychical research teams, they have once written all this down and said, well, do you know what? It's all down to the focus or the catalyst. It's usually an adolescent. It's sometimes more than a girl than it is a boy for some strange reason. And if you remove them, you remove the phenomena. Well, that's not exactly true, because we've done cases where we relocated the family and still had the poltergeist incidents taking place in the building. It isn't hard. It isn't written in stone. It's just a theory they put forward, because most of them might actually fall in line with it, but not all of them do, and that kind of throws it out. But we do find that there's a mechanism with poltergeist, this way that it seems to generate phenomena, and it's progressive. And it progresses and progresses and progresses all the way up to physical interaction, people being scratched, pulled, knocked around, and banged, and that sort of thing. But it seemingly is an intelligent entity because you can converse with them, you can entice them. It is different than a haunting phenomenon to some degree. Yeah, it can all roll into one. It becomes very difficult because you can have poltergeist infestation seemingly in areas where there seems to be hauntings taking place. It's problematic, and the problem lies with maybe our referencing on it. Maybe that we should just break down phenomena and call it for what it is, rather than just giving it title names. But you know what? I was involved in about 6 different cases. They were all quite very traumatic. One family, there was 3 young girls, and this thing was basically set to kill them. I mean, we had to carpet tape down the fire knob to turn it on, the gas, and also the gas cooker, because in the middle of the night suddenly they start choking, and the whole house is filled with gas. And it become very, very dangerous. She got thrown down the stairs. She broke a leg, and it was very concerning. We had to bring in obviously priests and stuff to try and do something about it. But they can reach that level. And they're very problematic, but they are also rare. But what's interesting is that the evidence to the manifestations of poltergeist phenomena seemingly take place at key points throughout the building. Those key points can be measured by an EMF meter. Now, we tend to use the tri-field meter. We don't use all the other ones because the bells and whistles and all the toys and stuff. We want proper, precise information. But what we found is that these areas where we're getting EMF, there was also a gravitational disturbance around items which were apported. Now, we talked to many people and said, look, you know what, this item was here and then it disappeared and it's turned up there. What happened is that we decided to take the items away. And when we took the items away, there was a lull or suppression in the phenomena for, say, up to 5 days sometimes, and they couldn't understand why. How can something like this, which is happening every single day, annoying us, and with all this stuff going on, suddenly stop for 5 days? What happened is we decided to take the apports away, always removing them from the property, which seemingly caused some confusion for the phenomena to set place back where it was supposed to manifest this phenomena in the house. So we were trying to figure out, why is that? Why do we get these suppressions when we remove the items? We thought, okay, well, it looks the same, this item, it feels the same. Under analysis, they're not. They are different under analysis. That has gone under changes which we cannot explain. But that's come from somewhere else. It's come through another reality. It's come from somewhere. And maybe that item is allowing the phenomena to track back to its location. And this is why when we remove the items, there's a sudden suppression in the phenomena. There's a lot of work that's going into the poltergeist infestation studies. Is what we refer to as the paranormal mechanics of it, because there is a mechanics of it. There's like a little rule book that they don't do certain things and they do certain things, and it's progressive, and this is what they have problems with. And what we thought was just the same item coming back from somewhere is not the same item. In all transparency, you look at it, it is. Only when you put it under the microscope, you start to realize vast differences. And lots of question marks as to why those differences are taking place. Whatever the process is and where it goes and comes back, it's rather that process is altering it, or simply it's not. It's a mimic of the item that left. And for years we never realized that there was those differences. Only now when we start to analyze apports, we start to realize that sometimes the phenomena follows the apport, and for a small duration of time before it ends up tracking back to the location, which makes it interesting when you talk about haunted items, but there is a mechanism there at play, and it's that study which is really fascinating, because we know with hauntings there's various different types. What we refer to as localized hauntings, where there's a connection between the property and the environment and the phenomena, or those translocational type ones where you think, what the hell am I doing seeing a Second World War soldier in a house that's only 5 years old in a location where, nothing to do with any connection to war or an army base or anything like that, just seemingly no connection to that environment. And of course, your residual phenomenon, which is seemingly imprinted into the environments and plays back over periods of time, which people witness it. But it all comes under the heading of hauntings, and it becomes problematic because there's various different types of phenomena taking place.
I could kind of relate. I'll tell you why. One, with poltergeist, when they're moving things, and I say this often, think about what an entity is, a spirit. It's raw energy. And the only way it's going to be able to physically touch you is by manipulating energy. And it's not going to feel good, whether it be they want to touch you pleasantly or they want to be mean. It's going to feel the same. They're manipulating energy to do this. Two, I wear a silver necklace with a solid silver $50. I'm very attached to this. If I pass, and this isn't per se, someone gets their hands on, I imagine I would have, if I'm here in this realm still, I'm definitely going to be attached to that item. I'm going to follow it around because I sleep with this necklace, I shower with it, I walk with it. I would not want to part with it. I can see how that would have an effect on your consciousness or your soul, whatever, one and the same. You would definitely have an attachment to that item. I would follow it around. If I'm still in this plane, I didn't go to the next level, or I didn't get recycled, I'm going to want my necklace back. And the torture for me is that I couldn't put it back on. I could see it. I could interact with it physically when I manipulate energy, but I can't pick it up. I cannot wear it. Right? I could only manipulate energy for a set amount of time before, it wastes away. And whoever's in the house that's interacting with my necklace, I'm going to be displeased, and I'm going to act up. And I've spoken to a number of investigators that say when there's entities doing horrible things, just the acknowledgement of them seems to lessen their aggression. Like an example, what you said about the items, which is why this rang true to me. There's a case I spoke to an investigator, and they said, "Oh, is this your book?" And we'll keep it safe for you, something of that nature. And the entity just not only just calmed down, it just went away.
It's true. Appeasing does work. Absolutely. People don't recognize to do so, many times, and they just don't think about, communicating. You think of the frustration of an entity that, you can't see or hear, or the most general frustration of being in that environment. There isn't enough people that try and appease the phenomenon, and try and come to some resolution. They think it's always evil. If you go and talk to some of most of the priests in the UK, they've said some terrible things like, "Oh yeah, you think we've got a demonic spirit," and it just adds to the problem. I've done that many, many times. Some priests. In fact, I've actually sent letters to authorities, to complain about priests and about their attitude and response on going out to assist a young couple that thought they were having paranormal disturbances. And they turn up and say, "Oh, you got a demonic entity and this, that, and the other." And they're absolutely petrified, this young couple. I had to complain. You can't deal with things like that,
Yeah. Now imagine a priest. Imagine energy. And I said this before. This is a 4 billion year old planet, give or take. Now there's something that's been around. It pre-exists, or man. It's been around long before mankind. It predates religion. And it's an older entity. And so now you got some guy in a robe, hollering religious jargon at it. And it's probably, what's this guy doing? Like, what do you think? That's going to work? I don't even understand your language, let alone what the words you're using, right?
Yeah, it was initially wrote up saying, "Begone your demonic entities." You can't make them demonic entities.
Yeah. No, imagine a child, Steve, imagine a child that's disgruntled because I've been talking to a lot of afterlife people. When people die instantly, they don't have that opportunity to transfer to the next plane or recycle or whatever they do. They're stuck here. Now imagine a frustrated being or entity that doesn't quite know what happened and it's lashing out in confusion. And then you got a priest in there like, "Oh, you must leave in the power of blah, blah, blah." And this poor entity's like, "I'm just trying to figure out what's going on." Right?
Yeah. Absolutely, and this is why many times your priest will say, "Okay, I think everything might be fine now," and he goes away, and the next day it's back.
Yep.
Probably even more annoyed because of the situation and the frustration, I mean, we did a statistical survey in the UK. I don't know how successful it is in the US, but only 12% of blessings on properties in the UK are successful. Only 12%.
I think it's less here.
Yeah.
I think it is because, the practice of Catholicism here, maybe back in, I don't know, before, 80s, 70s, 60s, but definitely after the 80s, the paranormal got lopped into a nonsensical subject matter, right? So a lot of priests distanced themselves from it. And not that saying it's bad or good, because I personally, again, I don't think a priest is going to solve a problem. I think he might remedy it for the moment because the entity is probably like, what does this idiot want? All right, I'll be back later, because for me, when I pass, apologies to my friends and family in advance. I'm a pain in the ass, man. I'm going to bother you, especially if I'm getting ignored. Oh my God, I'm going to give you a hell of a time. And if a priest comes and starts spitting jargon to me, I'm like, well, I don't quite believe the way you do, so that's not going to work, champ.
Yeah, exactly. Not enough people deal with it that way. I mean, they just, it's very driven by the things they hear, read, or watch on television.
Yeah.
Everything's demonic now, when in fact, I mean, we were, once ancient spiritual people that dealt with this probably on a daily basis. We were more in tune with the things around us. Now, not so much, but everything seems to be demonic entity. There's something, a little bang in the middle of the night could be something. Oh, it's evil. And this is the type of thing that we have to deal with now, is because the generation are growing up watching demonic type films all the time. Every haunting film is Hollywood gets hold of it, turns it into something profound and ridiculous, and everything is battling the devil. And that's the first thing that comes to their mind. To be honest with you,
I saw an interview with Travis Walton. And he was discussing the 1993 fire in the sky. And he said in the interview, and this is an old interview, he's like, this isn't even close to what I told these people. I'm not sure why they did this, And they did it to sell movies, right? That's exactly why. Tickets and purchases and franchises.
It is, yeah. I know Travis really well. Because, I mean, I went on a road trip with him for a week in the US. And we were going down a freeway, and there was an object in the sky that was following us. He followed us for about 5-6 miles. We had to stop twice on the freeway to watch it. And that was fascinating, and he was telling about his, I know him really well, and he's trying to get another movie done.
Yeah, in fact, it's happening actually.
But brilliant! Because the guy said when they made the first film, they said, what, we can't put in, these different type of entities, as human-looking ones, and this, that, and the other, because people aren't gonna believe it.
Yeah, and then he also tried to say his story was boring. I mean, come on, boring. He got abducted. It doesn't get more interesting than that. You don't need to add all the bullshit.
Yeah, he was very surprised, actually.
Yeah.
I've also heard the same thing come from Whitley Strieber about the film Communion. I
got to tell you that when I was a kid, that movie freaked me out.
It's a scary movie.
And not even the aliens. It's Christopher Walken. The way he acted it and the faces he made freaked me out.
He was great for that part.
He really was, man.
even Willie says, it's far from the actual event.
Yeah, it's true. Yep.
And this is, people don't read the books to know what the real event is most of the time. They follow the film, and then they take that as verbatim. And that's the problem with TV movies, is that as just an example. All you got to do is look at all the Conjuring type movies. I mean, the real information it's based on is very loose, and especially with the Warrens, and it's problematic. I mean, I think it was the second one or the third one when they come to England, Enfield Poltergeist. None of that's true. In fact, I've talked with the family on a couple of occasions, and the Warrens turned up in the UK. They did a short interview, which lasted about an hour and a half. They had a cup of tea. They felt sorry for the family, so they went out and bought them 4 or 5 bags of shopping, and then they left. And yet then you come across this movie, and none of it's true. It's just, it's the same.
There's this thing that happens. When I see it on, there's some really good Facebook groups out there, like UFO Hunters. They throw, and UFO Matrix and MUFON Global, MUFON Canada. They put these interesting stories out. Now, even though some of these stories put me in rabbit holes, I find good information. There's also these other people who put these absolutely fake videos up. It's so irresponsible. And they not only do they put them up, it's not a big deal. If you put it up, put a smiley face, ha ha ha, look at this. And then I know it's bullshit. But don't pass it as real. Because one, you're wasting my time. Two, I hate that. Especially when I'm digging for facts. I can't see that. Then you get these other guys that I'll never forget this. This is long ago. It was long before the podcast. My cousin and I were watching TV. Now, we lived together in a house some time ago. And there was a show, and this dude's in the house, and it's haunted. And he's pulling his shirt off. He's like, come out now. He's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, you think that's going to get a... Hypothetically speaking, there's a poltergeist in the room. If you rip your shirt off and challenge it to a fight, do you think you have a shot at winning that? You know, it's mind blowing.
It's all for entertainment. You know, we have it in the UK. You know, and do you know what? The younger generation are absolutely glued to it. You know, they absolutely love all that.
What happens is people like you and the other investigators of science, you take real scientific minded people that are researching this, and you shun them. You make them feel like they don't want to talk about their what they discovered because they're going to get lofted into the category of the guy's pulling the shirt off to pick a fight with a ghost, or he doesn't want that association, and it's irresponsible.
It doesn't. I mean, I'm part of a scientific establishment. A couple of them actually, S.E.P and stuff, which is the scientific establishment of parapsychology, and we've done investigations all over the world if they warrant it. I mean, we go through a lot of stuff about interviewing people over and over again, and it could be a good 6 months or something before we even warrant it, if we do have to necessarily go and try and help. There was such a case like that, but you know, we never really does the parapsychologist guys type deal with the ghost hunter types. You know, there seems to be a big divide between the two. I can understand the reasons why on some occasions. Normally, I don't get involved with local teams and things. You know, I mean, some of them do some really good work, others not so much. And we came loggerheads with one team, which was Ghost Adventures team.
Yeah.
You know, and we were asked to investigate a case that they said, you know, was something completely opposite of what we were experiencing there. And we came to loggerheads, and you know, they quickly took a step back. You know, they realised that obviously that there's a difference between the entertainment factor and people which are really traumatized and want some resolve because they can't live in the house under those conditions. That's the problem nowadays. I mean, we have a lot of ghost organisations and stuff. We have some in the UK, you know, and I don't think they consider how to deal with the trauma. We're dealing with people's lives here. Mostly it's about, let's go in, it's exciting, let's see if we can photograph something or video something, and then that's it. And then you go.
Yeah.
You know, and most of the time the guys are sat there thinking, what the hell? You know, I'm still left with this problem, and it's tearing through the house, it's ruining my relationship. I don't know what to do, I need some help. You know, and there is different levels of that investigation. Unfortunately, you know, I mean, it does draw a lot of interest to paranormal. You know, I mean, everybody likes to have that fear factor sometimes and get a great photograph which they can share and talk about amongst their friends. The bottom line is, though, most of the time, it's places like stately homes and castles, or, you know, and just a walk around the cemetery, and that's not a problem. But when you're dealing with people's lives, when they reach out to say, look, you know, we are a family which are really in need of some help, they've got to know how to really deal with that. And sometimes we have to go and clean up. We have to go into these locations because they've had somebody out and it's just gone all wrong for them. And we've had to try and clean up, and we call them cleanups. You know, we try and resolve it. And they are the pinnacle of our list of witnesses, those that are living in the environment. Their safety is always the pinnacle thing, and what can we do for them? Rather than the other way around, because many organisations put the phenomena at the top of the list as opposed to the witnesses. It's a shame, but it does happen.
You want to hear something too? I'm going to introduce you to this woman too. She doesn't want public, you know, she doesn't want to be in the eye of the public, but I discovered her through a third party, and she lives in Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans. And her story bothered me, man. She's I think she's almost 33 years old, young woman, very attractive. But she's become desensitized to the whole thing because whatever's been harassing her, it's basically ruined her life. She can't keep relationships. Her animals never shut up. She's like, I had a cat and it would all night scream, hiss, and meow. Had to get rid of my cat. Whatever this is attached to her. She's asked for help. Yeah, she asked for help. They said people came, they had priests, they had investigators. Nothing worked. She finally just gave up. She goes, I just had to ignore it and wake up and go to work so I could keep my home. She's even moved and it went with her. Now, she can't have her, and it's a shame because Steve, when you look at her, she's a beautiful girl, but you could hear the depression in her voice. She's like, all I do is I work. I go to work, I come home, I eat dinner, I go for walks, and no matter where I go, I'm harassed. I can't keep a boyfriend, meaning so she can't have a relationship, can't have animals, and everyone she's told this to, it's either they can't help or when they do witness it, they leave her because it's so. So when I asked her, like, when I do the documentary, I'm going to stop by you. Okay. She goes, yeah, I'm okay with it. She goes, I don't want to be on film. I don't want to discuss my story. She goes, I just wanted to go away. I want to be a normal person. And this has been happening since she's 17. Her life's been in disarray. So that's one of the places I'm going to stop. And when you were talking about like these people that come, they do a show and they record, and then they leave. These people they're in pieces. Their life's in pieces. It's a shame.
I've seen this with elderly couple. There was an elderly couple which were having problems, and I've seen I got called out to them after they said a male. They said there was a knock on the door one day, and there was a guy stood there like he looked like a wizard, like Gandalf.
Right.
He said, "I'm here to help get rid of the dad, get rid of your problems and stuff." And I did this whole weird religious type strange thing he did in one of the back rooms, and everything just got really, really bad. And we said, honestly, we never realized. I mean, they're in the 70s, and they said, we never realized there are people out there that do this sort of stuff. So we didn't know if these people are going to do any good or not. And it just got worse and worse for them, to be honest with you. But you are right. I mean, you do get attachments. You do get sometimes long-term attachments that affect people's lives. And we go through a process. We try and fine-tune. There are different, seemingly, it's going to sound a bit strange, but there are seemingly different entities that dislike different things. Some of them dislike UV. Yeah, because we know that we're within the infrared. We know through scientific studies now that when we utilize infrared in an environment, I know most ghost guys will go out there and the first thing they do is they turn off all the lights and start throwing infrared all around. That they like the infrared. What they don't like is the UV, because it disassembles the phenomenon in a sense of speaking. Not for all of them, but many of them. So the UV, we have provided UV bulbs, and they're very dull looking,
right?
But we've asked people to put them on around houses where there's problems, and when they especially start occurring at night. Why did they occur at night? Most of these there's no UV around. They love the infrared, and that once the sun disappears, it becomes an infrared realm to them, to sense of speaking. Then we come along and boost it with our equipment. So that does deter them sometimes. If it doesn't, then we go to the next stage of placing iron around. Now, iron goes back to a very old traditional thing, and I thought it was absolute bloody nonsense, to be honest with you. But it isn't. We've cleared houses. We're not even going there, just going through the protocol with them to get them to do certain things. There's a bit of a battle, a bit of an upset for the first week or two. There's kind of this determination that I'm not going. And what they've done is, on some occasions, they've fled the location because of UV and iron and gone and manifested in the closet downstairs and things like that. So, and they creep back once you start taking these things out. There are evasions to iron, there are evasions to UV, there are evasions to certain elements. And the most important thing, sunlight is very important to bring into the house. Sunlight, natural UV. And secondly, probably the biggest of all, is the individuals, because there's a coexistence between phenomena and the individuals that are experiencing it on many occasions. May not be aware of it, but their stress and vexation and upset is feeding the phenomena, and this vicious cycle goes on and on. We go through that process. If we have to go out, we will go out, and we'll do as best as we possibly can. But we have been successful to the point where I got a phone call one day from Australia, and it was the FREE, FREE. It's a foundation for extraterrestrial research of extraterrestrial entities. It was set up by astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And there's quite a number of people in this organization, including Mary Wadwell, who specializes in the alien abduction phenomenon. It's basically they specialize in contact and alien abduction. Some of these people are having such bad experiences. They wanted to interview me regarding the protocols that we had. So we decided to start utilizing the protocol, even under those conditions, bedroom visitations at night, people being taken who don't want this type of phenomena to happen. And even that had some play. It deterred the phenomena, some of it, not all of it, but it deterred some of it. So it was very interesting that you get very similar deteriorations in phenomena, not only in the paranormal, but also those UFO entities that seemingly appeared at night, just as you would do of a shadow person. There seems to be a connection there. It doesn't work all the time, but it does work on some of the time. So we go through that process. It's seemingly we're dealing with different types of entities. Some may be stronger than others, or some just don't seem to have an adverse effect against iron or UV. But sometimes it does work. So we've had said to people, the first thing to do is implement these. It gives us a better understanding of what we might be dealing with at the end of the day.
You know what? It's kind of funny you say. I'd spoken to this guy, and I don't know, it's been a few months now. It's one of the off-air. I do a lot of these interviews off air because they don't have a story lengthy enough to talk. But, he brought up something to me that I never considered. He said he was having visitations, experiences from quote unquote aliens.
Yeah.
He said it stopped when he started drinking. And when he said that to me, I was like, well, did you just drink so much you don't remember? Now you really don't remember? Or did you taint their experiment with alcohol? Right, you're useless to him now, right? Like, oh no, he's drinking now. His organs, he's not good for the experiment. On to the next one. Because if you think about what he said to me, and it slapped me in the face in the middle of the night, long after I'd spoken to him. But most studies that are medical in real life, you could be disqualified by what you do, what you consume, if you smoke, you drink, what food you're eating. And I wonder if his drinking is like, well, he's out of the study now. I mean,
it's funny you mention that, because if you do a grand study of people who have the most traumatic type of paranormal experiences, you'll find that there seems to be a pattern, and that pattern can be it's a trauma pattern. Phenomena like this love trauma, especially when it's induced at an early age, and they've grown up with it, and it can be financial problems, family issues, poor living conditions. Those things, the sort of things can cause attachment in those environments. But later on in life, we find that some of these individuals have turned to the church, for an example.
Right.
And the phenomena seems to love that sort of thing, because it's kind of, well, there's a challenge on here. Because if you look at the most traumatic of experiences, you'll find there's a connection between them and people which are devout Catholic. The more you see me,
you're actually right about that. That's scary. And their explanations, it's the devil. Okay.
Yeah. The most traumatic of experiences are those that are induced with the strong belief of devout Catholicism, but have gone through the process of trauma through their lives. All you've got to do is look at some of the biggest cases, around the world, and they seem to form the same pattern. So
yeah, you're right.
Phenomenon is attracted to trauma to some degree.
All right. So before we close, though, I want to cover the paracoustic phenomena that you highlighted.
Yeah, I mentioned about paracoustic phenomena because we're having some breakthroughs in regarding the paraacoustics is right across the full realm now. We've recognised it within the paranormal regions, the ufological regions, and also the cryptids, believe it or not. And we have a lot of people reporting the smell of sulphur. We've had it reported in paranormal cases, not so many, but we do get it occasionally. And we definitely get it within the ufological. And we also get the smell of sulfur reported in some of the cryptid type phenomena that's been seen outdoors in wooded areas and things. We found the frequency. There's a certain frequency that can be provided. It's an infrasonic frequency, but if you get it right, you can generate a sense of the illusion of smell, or the illusion of scent. And that scent has been described as, under experiment, as sulfur. So we're thinking, are they really smelling sulfur, or is it induced through an infrasonic sound, which is a form of a paranormal acoustic of some sort? We know that they cause infrasonic sounds during the paranormal phenomena because it causes certain conditions to take effect, the fear frequency as well. We've had people said, suddenly they're filled with fear and dread for no apparent reason. They don't understand why they fear so much. That can be induced. And what we found was during only a few months ago, is that we were looking into the animal mutilation phenomena, apparently closely associated to what people believe is the UFO stuff. And the cattle and animals that had been found, they decided to take some tests from the brain cells. And they found that the animals were alive at the time of these incidents. They weren't unconscious or killed prior.
Well, yeah, it's not post-mortem.
No, they were alive. And the amount of cortisone and adrenaline in the brain was amplified to the point where it could only have been generated by absolute terror. And what we're finding is the soft tissues taken from the animals is where mucous membrane lies. Now, mucous membrane lies in all the soft tissued areas around any body. And these are areas that deal with the immunity system. And what happens is that when you generate absolute terror in these animals, what happens is the cortisone and adrenaline within the bodies super increases and pushes it all to the soft tissue. And that is where these animals parts are taken from, the soft tissue and the blood, which obviously needs the immune system within the blood. We're thinking that there may be a reason why they're taking tissues and organs from certain parts of the bodies, because it's seemingly the same throughout many different types of animals, because we've now found that the likelihood is that they are alive at the time to generate the fear. And the absolute terror it generates causes the immunity system to go into overload and create vast amounts of adrenaline and cortisone pushed to the mucous membrane, which is the immunity system. So we're trying to figure out then is that if something is responsible, and you've got to consider it's not easy to catch a cow and drain it of 15 gallons of blood without dropping any and without any marks, especially when you find that some of these things are seemingly impact wounds, which are dropped from great height. Even a cow was found. I interviewed a guy in Colorado, a farmer. He found one in a tree. How did he get in a tree? And it was mutilated, but it was in a tree. And of course, we start to look at this. It gives us the plausibility that there may be a reason regarding the immunity system, the study of the immunity system of these animals, why these things are taking place. And of course, what's also happening is that the plausibility of a generated infrasonic sound, it's around about 19 hertz and amplified. That 19 hertz also causes the increase in adrenaline and cortisol. It's known as the fear frequency. It generates inner fear as well. So, and people have been reported that around UFOs, cryptids, and all sorts of different things. It makes it very interesting to consider that the phenomena could be utilizing some form of para-acoustics to get what it wants.
I have to agree. I'll tell you what, a long time ago, and so anger and fear both have a similar chemical response. It's adrenaline, right? And yes. When I was younger, I was dating someone, and so something happened, and I had a cold. Like I remember I was home, I had a cold, and something got me so enraged that I was dumping adrenaline that I didn't realize till after the incident was over, my cold was gone. Well, it's like my immune system went into hyper gear because of that response.
Hyperimmune system, what sort of causes, you see, drawing under those conditions, your immune system goes into overload. So basically what you've just done is the body has just provided a huge dose to the system.
Right. Yeah, because I'll never forget that. I remember I was home on the couch, not feeling good, like really sick. And she came home and told me something had happened, and I went to absolutely, like, my adrenaline was jacked. And then that cold was gone after the incident was over, right? I was like, I remember, and then how do you, I remember thinking, well, another thing, I'm sick. How do I get angry? I got to.
Well, it's true though. I mean, people don't realize is about the balance within the system, the biological system. That super boost of immunity can do wonders. Inducing it is, people don't really know how much they'll be able to induce it, but it's super induced by frequency and terror. Yep. So if these animals are alive, and they're saying that they're alive because the amount of adrenaline, cortisol in the brain indicates they're alive at the time of the incident. They feel everything and all that sort of thing. It must be absolutely horrific for the poor things. But the reasoning behind it is that there could be a long study taking place in regarding immunity.
Yeah, I would say.
The common cold and all the things we face today, which, we could, if we're scary, if you draw up a list on the internet of all the things that are out there, which we live with. There are tens and tens of thousands of different illnesses and disease that we walk through every day. And
I mean, every cold and flu you've ever had, the remnants are still in your body. You're immune to it now, right? You built an immunity.
The body remembers everything. Everything where its immune system has been activated, it remembers. And because what happens is that when you get the same thing again, it attacks it faster. And the scientists thought, well, how are they attacking it faster? How can you mean it? Because it remembers it. It remembers it from last time. It knows how to kind of deal with it. So the more times we have it, the better it gets, to be honest with you.
It's true. Based on everything you just said, it actually helps support things that I discussed earlier with you, right? If they're doing a hybrid program, it's going to take a very long time. And one of the key elements would be the human immune system. If you want a hybrid to coexist here on Earth, the immune system is definitely on the top of that list. So it makes sense why they study this.
Yeah. I mean, if you look just at, how many people have these encounters with these beings, but they don't seem to be very a long round in our environment for very long, do they? We might be taken away into their environment quite quickly. They don't seem to hang around our environment for very long. So is this long-term study associated to the to the human immunity system? Because we've generated that over thousands.
Steve, I tricked somebody. I called a scientist because I knew he wouldn't come on the show and talk about what I wanted to talk about. So I called him and asked some questions. And I'm like, hey, how long would it take for us to change our biology to live on a planet that's like Earth, but it's different, different kind of air? And so his answer was, it would take at least a millennia for us to perfect that. And that's what our technology. And I was, in my mind, I wanted to say this to him. Like, well, now that you said that, why are aliens studying us for a long period of time? You just answered it, but I can't do that to him. But it was funny that he said that. A millennia before we could perfect it so we could go breathe the air in another planet.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it really does. It's food for thought because you've got to consider if these can achieve the immunity that we have, then experiencing this phenomenon might be a completely different ballgame.
It's true. So, Steve, this is why I like talking to you. You make me think. Every time I finish a podcast with you, I'm like, I got a whole bunch of shit to think about now.
Yeah, it is fascinating. But you know what? We don't like to just present things and leave them on the table. Cancel installations have been going on since the 70s. Well, they've been going on for a long time. But the most of them, took place in the 1970s, mostly Colorado, FBI investigated. It's been 40, 50 years now, we've got, and it's still sat there. Yep. People are delving into it, the technology we've got now. Mutilation phenomenon is still happening. France have got a load of it with horses at the moment. They have done over the last 6-7 months. It's actually preposterous. They can't understand what's going on there. And it's a whole load of horses at the moment. Exactly the same things as what's happening with the cattle. But you know what? We're trying to press forward to, why and what is happening. The immunity system, it's all in the blood. Huge, when it goes into overload, it's in the blood, it's in the soft tissue. And those are the things that are disappearing on these animals. So it's food for thought as to, the reasons behind and everything is seemingly at this moment, with the new technology and new evidence going forward, suggests it's the immune system.
Yeah, I you know what? I mean, out of all the theories I've had, this is now adding to it, and it's giving me a whole new chapter to think about, because the immune system would definitely be, again, top of the order to make a hybrid program work. I mean, exactly. That's the biggest concern for Gray. It's not, forget about not being able to breathe here, because we know if we had a spacesuit, we could breathe on another planet because our suit is going to help us breathe. What we don't know is if, God forbid, a contamination got in there, we inhaled it, we breathed it, touched our skin, how would our immune system respond to that? It would probably kill us, you know?
Exactly.
So that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a feasible one. It's the only one I can come up with at this moment in time, but it is interesting. Those studies are still going on, more so now. But now we're realizing that there's something to do with the immunity system. I think so.
Steve, we're going to close out. I'm going to talk to you in post because we're going to schedule something new. I'm sorry for everyone that is not going to be able to hear this part of the conversation, so we're going to say goodnight to you. We're going to talk in post. Everyone, good night.
Thank you. Yeah, we enjoyed it.